You're listening to the Pittsburgh Piledriver Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Pittsburgh Piledriver Podcast. This is our second episode of the week, and this episode, unlike the first one, may not be filled with a lot of jubilance. We're going to talk some serious things that have happened within the wrestling industry. Not recently, but in the past. But nonetheless, they are serious events. Tonight, we are going to heavily cover the most recent episode of Dark Side of the Ring that has come out, which is the Plane Ride from Hell. So, if you're not familiar with that, what I suggest you do at this point, pause this recording, go and either watch or listen to the Dark Side of the Ring episode, Plane Ride from Hell. It will give you a lot of good information on what we are going to rant and reference here tonight. It's not often that we tell you, hey, go listen to this instead of this show, but I'm going to tell you this now. If you haven't watched Dark Side of the Ring, pause this. I think it's on YouTube. Go freaking find it. It's the internet. You can find things. Find the Dark Side of the Ring episode, Plane Ride from Hell. Watch it. Then come back and listen to this episode. There's a lot of heavy stuff that we're going to cover tonight. I'm your host, Ransom the Madman, with my co-presenters, the best damn friends that anyone could have, with four best friends that anyone. So, yeah, that's me. Poot the Bard is here. Tiger Bomb Tom is here. Beef the Legend is here. The last two tag team cruiserweight champions. Don't want to leave that out. But there's not a lot of fun kerfufflery that's going to happen in this intro because this is going to be a rather serious episode of the Pittsburgh Piledriver Podcast where we break down a lot of heavy allegations made against wrestlers within the WWE by, I don't know, you tell me after you watch the Dark Side of the Ring. Are they credible sources? Are they not? I don't know. But we're going to talk about the allegations that was made in that. So before we kick this off, I do want to ask, boys, have you guys had a chance to watch or at least read up on the Dark Side of the Ring episode, Plane Ride from Hell?
Twice. I watched it.
Twice.
I watched it, yeah. I was going to give it a second watch through, but I didn't get around to it, but I did watch it once already. So.
God, I don't know how you guys watched it twice. After one watching, I wanted to go dunk my head in the fucking toilet. Before I know, and this is not being smart, this is serious, because I think of any of us, now I was very upset when I found out more details about shit. With this, like, stuff that's firsthand accounts and everything. The thing that really kind of opened my eyes, and I know this seems like an ancillary thing because there is a giant issue we need to talk about. Two giant issues, actually, and they're kind of tied in together. How big of a dirtbag is Mike Chioda? Like, seriously. Like, he comes off as a dirtbag. He comes off as a guy that's on a list somewhere. Like, And all offense meant to this, so if you were one of these people in high school, please take offense. He's like one of those people that like ran around with the football team with like a water boy or a towel boy that thought they were one of the football players and acted like they were one of the football players, but the football players like, no, these guys are just fucking geeks. That's Mike Chioda.
Really, if I'm going to be honest, I feel like the only two wrestlers or WWE employees that they interviewed in that episode that really didn't come off like pieces of shit were Rob Van Dam. Ironically. And oddly enough, Justin Credible didn't really come off as a big piece of shit. I
don't think JR did either. I think JR was kind of like...
Well, I think we need to talk about that.
Okay.
So basically, just to summarize this up, the Plane Ride from Hell was the return trip from a European tour. Everything that transpired happened whenever they were leaving Europe and coming back to the United States. To give a little backstory, they sat on the tarmac for 7 hours because of a weather delay in Connecticut. So I'm sure they put a lot of blame on, the boys were restless. They just did a big European tour. Now they have to sit on the tarmac for 7 hours and wait to take off, blah, blah, blah. To me, I don't give a shit. That's all excuses. Yep. They ordered and went through 3 liquor carts, not the travel-sized liquor bottles like we get on commercial flights, full bottles of liquor, 3 carts full. There were allegations of people who were H-bombing their fellow wrestlers. If you don't know what that is.
That's the date rape drug, is it not?
Halcyon?
Halcyon.
Halcyon.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Those are
Halcyon.
Yeah.
Either
those
way.
are pills that help you sleep.
They relieve pain and knock you out.
They're power pills.
When mixed, they can make you act goofy.
Yeah, and they're putting these pills in people's drinks because it's funny. Let that sink in. It's a rib. Let that sink in for a second. Nowhere in any of this did anyone other than Rob Van Dam have negative things to say about putting this drug Halcyon in people's drinks, watching them drink it, and then watching them go into some sort of insane stupor and pass out and almost like they were dead. Nobody not even JR. JR didn't condemn it. Rob Van Dam did not have positive things to say about it, and he even said, people, did that in other promotions that I was in. It didn't sound like Rob Van Dam was wild about it, but nobody condemned such a thing. So that's one. Other things that happened on this plane ride was at the end of the plane ride, empty beverage containers were left strewn about the cockpit or the fuselage. Empty food containers, food trampled into the floor, needles. Let me say that again for those people who didn't hear it the first time. Needles were found in the plane. Vomit, blood. There was a wrestler who is currently with AEW now, don't give a shit, Gold Dust, who was using one of the seat backs as a spittoon after he had put in his Copenhagen or whatever and was spitting it in the back of that. So these wrestlers really trashed this plane. At one point in time, Kurt Hennig put some shaving cream on Brock Lesnar's head, smashed it down. Brock Lesnar charged at Kurt Hennig, and they wrestled all around this fuselage, breaking chairs, breaking overhead compartments, basically really destroying a lot of stuff. At other points in time, Scott Hall claimed that he was H-bombed, he thinks, by Kurt Hennig.
Allegedly.
Michael Hayes, they alleged, was H-bombed, which led to Michael Hayes punching Bradshaw in the face and busting him open again from a previous injury that he had suffered at one of the events. That led Bradshaw to slap Michael Hayes so hard that it knocked Michael Hayes out. X-Pac then cut off Michael Hayes' ponytail. Not that egregious of a thing, but hey, it happened. It's worth mentioning. The biggest problems, as far as I see, aside from the fact that needles were found, these guys were drugging each other with Halcyon in drinks for a rib. They said that on the episode. Yep, guys do this for a rib. You're excusing that? Okay. Not only that, the main flight attendant who was catering to these gentlemen, I say loosely.
It sounds like she was the only flight attendant.
There was a couple. There were multiple.
Were there? Okay.
Yeah.
She was the only one that was interviewed because there was another one that filed suit first.
Yep.
And encouraged her to file along with her. But the flight attendant, the woman that was interviewed on Dark Side of the Ring, said that at one point in time, and the guys, the wrestlers who were interviewed, corroborated at least the first part of this story and said that Ric Flair got naked, put his robe on, and would walk down the aisle with his robe uncinched and open, swinging his dongle around.
And let me interject real quick. And this is something that, according to, I believe, both Tommy Dreamer and Rob Van Dam, this was not something that was an uncommon. This was not an uncommon occurrence. So this didn't just happen.
Nope.
On this particular flight. Now,
a normal thing that Ric Flair would do.
Because of why? Because it got a laugh from the boys.
It made the degenerates laugh.
I remember hearing about this like the next day. Okay, like back in 2002.
This was in like 2002, 2003. Yeah.
I think because we were in college.
Yes.
Maybe not. Maybe this, but regardless, I remember hearing about it. But I remember the focal points being Scott Hall getting in a fight, which did not happen, and Kurt Hennig and Brock Lesnar getting in fights. That's why they let Kurt Hennig and Scott Hall go. So it's amazing that they swept this under the rug, all of it, for 20 years before this shit came out.
WWE is a powerful, powerful company, and if you need proof of that, this episode is it. So the cherry that goes on top of this shit sundae is the fact that at one point after Ric Flair had opened up his robe and swung his dongle around, which apparently the boys popped for, I don't know what kind of club you have to belong to really get a good laugh out of seeing an old man swing his dick around, but it's clearly not a club that I've ever been a part of, because I don't know that I would necessarily be like, oh, that's fucking hilarious. Look at that guy swinging his schlong. No, man. I mean, you do you, but that's not something that I pop for. That's not something that I find entertaining and or funny. But to each his own. The big problem there is he was doing this not just in front of the wrestling boys, but he was doing this in front of the flight attendants as well. So these are people that are not in the wrestling business, that don't know Ric Flair, that haven't seen Ric Flair's Johnson before. And at one point, this flight attendant alleges that Ric Flair went back into the kitchen area to get something to drink and pretty much cornered her back there, would not let her leave, and almost forced himself on her by wanting her to touch his dick.
RVD corroborated that, by the way.
Yes.
Not the,
RVD
not
did.
the, hey, grab my dick, but he's like, hey, he had her cornered. He's like, I was sitting in the back. I remember him being in the galley with her.
I think at one point he said that Flair was trying to get, and I'd have to go back and rewatch, but I think he corroborated the story that Flair was trying to get this flight attendant to touch his dick.
And
so
the
Goldust credit,
Sorry,
to Goldust credit, and this I find this to be extremely disturbing. So at least two people witnessed this happen. At least Rob Van Dam and Goldust witnessed this happen. I would have to think if these two saw it on a plane full of wrestlers, somebody else saw this happen as well, not just these two guys. But the thing that really bothers me is the fact that nobody on this plane tried to stop that from happening except for Goldust. She said at one point in time, Goldust did get up and say to Flair, hey, leave her alone. One dude, one wrestler on this entire fucking plane.
Well, because the rest of them were all fucking pilled and drunk to the fucking moon. Real quick, do you guys remember, and this was when the network was in its infancy, WWE was doing these like little shorts with story time.
Yep.
With like animated, but like the wrestler, it was the actual wrestlers talking, but they would animate it.
Yes.
They had one with Ric Flair where Ric Flair talked about, putting on the robe in a room full of like 5 flight attendants on a plane and like taking them to Space Mountain and all that. And like immediately, like the minute I saw this episode, I was like, I remembered that. And luckily somebody posted it on the one group that I follow, and I saw it and I'm like, man. And WWE took it down immediately, like as soon as fucking did. Dark Side of it, because like suddenly it doesn't seem like Old Nature Boys having them line up for fucking Space Mountain. Suddenly it seems like Old Nature Boys forcing them to line up for Space Mountain.
Yeah, it sounds less like a ha-ha and more like a sexual assault.
Well, and
so all of this, we're gonna talk about all these things that happen and our opinions and all this, but keep in mind as well, not only did all this stuff happen on a plane, at one point in time, did it get so bad during the fight between Kurt Hennig and Brock Lesnar. One of the wrestlers was on the PA mic, being drunk and belligerent, screaming, we're all gonna die, blah, 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 blah. The flight attendants couldn't stop Kurt Hennig and Brock Lesnar from fighting, breaking seats, breaking overhead compartments, To which JR didn't make him sound great in this. To which JR said he went back into the back to try to break it up, and he said, they're play fighting. They're play fighting. I get it. They're big dudes. But when you're play fighting, you're not breaking seats on a plane. You're not breaking overhead compartments on a plane. You don't have the flight staff worried that one of these guys could physically damage the fuselage of the plane enough for them to
30,000
reference,
feet.
enough for them to reference needing to make an emergency landing over the Atlantic. Right. That's not play fighting. You're fucking breaking shit. So A, that's disturbing. And B, everything that we're going to talk about, keep this in mind. Everything that we're going to talk about here on the plane ride from hell happened with not only Vince McMahon sitting in first class, but Linda McMahon sitting in first class as well. Vince and Linda McMahon were on this plane when all of this bullshit was happening. And not once did anybody say anything about Vince or Linda stepping up and controlling their employees. Not the boys, not a fraternity bros, not the good old, hey man, they're all like, hey, jackety jack. No, these are fucking adults who are employees of a company. And the two leaders of that company, Vince and Linda, on this flight did nothing.
They did something. They did something. They made JR be the bad guy. They said, hey, you're the leader of talent relations. You handle it. Bull fucking shit. If, when the Titanic went down, the fucking captain didn't go, okay, I'm just going to sit here. Don't worry about it. First mate, go take care of everybody. No, he stepped up and was like, all right, let's figure this shit out and do the best we can. Vince McMahon delegated because he didn't want to get his fucking pristine Stamford, Connecticut hands dirty.
Yep. And the crazy thing, like Ransom was saying, all like a lot of stuff started on the tarmac, but all the play fighting, the quote unquote play fighting, that was happening, 30,000 feet in the air.
Yeah.
And I mean, regardless if they were play fighting or not, if you're having a crew legitimately worried that somebody's gonna break the fucking fuselage on the emergency exit door and cause a fucking catastrophe at 30,000 feet in the air, that's a fucking problem.
Well,
one of the pilots came out of the cockpit.
Yep.
To try to regain order on this plane. One of the pilots came out of the cockpit to try to settle this shit down and was unable to do so. Pilot of the plane. And JR said it best. If this had happened on a commercial flight, the FBI would have been sitting on the tarmac waiting for this plane to land. Yep. But since it happened on a private chartered plane, none of that shit happened.
Yep. And
there was a point during the quote-unquote play fighting where they were slamming each other against the fucking emergency exit door. Like,
yep.
The flight attendant was like, hey, they probably wouldn't have gone through it, but they didn't fucking know that. Like,
because they're big, because it's fucking Brock Lesnar and goddamn Kurt Hennig.
And I'm telling you, Kurt Hennig may have been fucking around, but we know Lesnar now. Like, we've known Lesnar for 20 years. We know that Lesnar doesn't fuck around. He's got a temper, and he's very prone to, big, giant, angry guy. Kurt Hennig may have been fucking laughing the whole time, but I bet you Lesnar was trying to fucking rip his head off.
Oh, not only let's not even belitter the fact that it was also brought up that not only we got all the stuff about Ric Flair, but supposedly I can't remember if it was, I think they mentioned that on this flight Brock may have also
it was not on the flight, but it was at the Insurrection show. I was going to mention that. And this is the first time I'm hearing about this. Terry Runnels says that Brock Lesnar exposed himself to her.
That's what it was.
Dustin, who at the time was her ex-husband, said, don't sell, because
that's what the females were told all the time. Just don't make a big deal about it. Don't let them know that it got to you, which is fucking bullshit.
And I'll say this, I am very thankful for the progressive movement that we've had the last couple of years, where women are not kind of afraid to come out. And I think that that's kind of led to this flight attendant coming out and being able to share her story, because the fucking boys club of, hey, just ignore it. If you get pissed off, then they're just going to do it more. Bullshit. I don't care if Ric Flair said grab my dick or not. By him exposing himself to a woman that was not looking to ride Space Mountain, sexual assault. Should have been in jail and should have been on fucking a list where he had to introduce himself to every fucking neighborhood that he had every time he had to move when he got fucking divorced and said he's a fucking sex offender with a record.
And and the sad thing is, and this is diving even deeper, there are people that get put on those registries and shit like that for way less, for like fucking taking a piss while you're drunk in public or something.
Yep.
Like
100%.
Get the fuck out of here. And I'm gonna say this as far as the boys club, because it's gonna come up, and I'm gonna say this. If anybody out there is listening to this and says, "Oh, people are overreacting and boys will be boys," go fuck yourself.
Yep.
Go fuck yourself, because
turn the
number one,
podcast off and go find a different podcast.
because number one,
we don't need you.
Number one, I wasn't ever raised to act that way. Okay. And number two, I'll be damned if I want my daughter dating anybody that ever acts like that, or if I ever want my son becoming somebody like that. If you think that's okay and you have a daughter or you have kids and you think that sort of behavior is okay for them, you're fucking doing life wrong. I'm just going to tell you that right now.
100%.
So
let's talk about the aftermath that happened with this too and how egregious that is. So Scott Hall got fired.
Yeah.
So
I think the day after Scott Hall got fired because...
Let's talk about why Scott Hall got so fucking wrecked on the plane. Now, he claims he was H-bombed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure he probably was, but I'm sure he probably also, housed one of those liquor carts himself. Scott Hall is well documented.
He had a lot of drug and alcohol problems as it was, and this was just kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. Like,
he was basically a corpse. At the end of the flight, they were like, "Oh my God, is he alive?" Luckily, fucking just incredible, PJ Polacco, was straight thinking enough to all right, weekend of Bernie's it,
pretty much.
And I keep in mind that this all transpired, about a year and a half? No, about a year after September 11th. So
yeah, right.
With everything being on high alert, I can't imagine PJ pulling this guy's fucking passport out and being like, "Oh no, he's fine. He's just he gets like this sometimes." It's just staggering to think about how
it boggles your mind.
It does. And then who was it? I think it was Kyoto that said, because Hall got fired and Hennig got fired. I think it was either Kyoto or Tommy Dreamer that said that Hennig probably would have cycled back around and came back to WWE, but he died.
Had he not passed away.
Yeah.
Yep. Scott Hall, they didn't have him on this episode, but they had a sound clip of Scott Hall saying he had been drinking and taking pills at the same time for years at this point, and he never had a blackout incident that bad, which is what led him to claim that he believed that Curt Hennig H-bombed him on this plane. So whether or not that happened is irrelevant. Scott Hall got fired. Curt Hennig got fired for the fight. Nothing allegedly, at least in this episode, came out about any disciplinary action against Brock Lesnar. Goldust got fined because...
Did Xbox get fired?
No.
Nope.
Okay.
Goldust got fined instead of fired because he had gotten on the mic at one point and started singing, some love song to Terry.
Yeah.
And he was also using the back of a seat as a spittoon for his shoe.
Of everything that happened, his was probably the least egregious, or I'd say X-Pac, because he cut off Michael P.
Hayes' ponytail. Nothing happened to X-Pac.
So JR even said it was basically with Goldust, it was up to JR's discretion whether to fire or fine him, and he didn't believe that with everything else that had happened that Goldust deserved to be fired. And I agree with that decision. You fine him.
Man, with everything else that happened on that plane.
Yeah.
Goldust, of all people, the one person who supposedly, at least according to this flight attendant, the one person that came to Ric Flair and said, "Hey, man, it's time to go. Leave her alone." He did not deserve to be fired,
right.
But yet he still got fined. All the other guys who trashed this plane Nothing. According to this episode, at least. According to this episode, and according to JR, who was on this episode, nothing. Ric Flair, who had his dick out on a plane, exposing himself to flight attendants, nothing. Just like the people who send in Stump the Chumps to this show, nothing. So let that sink in for a hot second. This was corroborated by many, many people on this plane. I think everybody that was interviewed, it was corroborated by. Kyoto, Just Incredible, Van Dam.
Yep.
Tommy Dreamer, who, boy howdy, can we talk about how much of a piece of shit he came off like. Fucking Tommy Dreamer, who pretty much excused Flair's entire behavior as, hey, it's a rib, it's Flair being Flair, he's popping the boys, ha ha ha. Ric Flair got zero repercussions for exposing himself and allegedly trying to force himself on a flight attendant.
Yep. I think the thing that really stuck out to me is, we need to hear Pooh because we've been translating.
Yeah, we've been dominating, and I apologize.
But like at the end of the episode, they were talking about the repercussions, and you could hear the cameraman ask, "So what about Ric Flair?" to JR, who was head of talent relations. There was a long, pregnant pause.
Oh,
and
JR said more in his pause.
Yep.
Than any other information that came out on this show.
Yep, JR kind of went, I don't know. And somebody else, it was either Kyoto or Tommy Dreamer, talked about him being a made man.
Yep.
Like, I thought that was JR that said that.
It may have been JR because so much was happening there at the end. But talked about him being a made man. Bullshit. This, first of all, like the mafia, I'm not going to get into that. But the WWE is not the fucking mafia.
Well,
all right.
I mean, Jimmy Snuka killed a guy, so
that's fair. But we're not talking about one of Vince McMahon's kids. If anything, we're talking about a guy who Vince McMahon did not help build, did not create his character, and let him come over. I have no idea how all of this has had a lid on it for fucking 20 years. And how Flair has been Flair. Here's the problem. This is a sticky wicket. Because with Ric Flair getting away with this incident, who knows how many more times he was a sexual predator. I'm going to say it again. Who knows how many more times Ric Flair was a sexual predator. Because he didn't get his ass chewed out and fired on this one.
Not fired, but prosecuted.
Well, yeah. I will say this. One, I think the only reason it probably stayed under wraps for so long was probably in part of the settlement. There was probably a non-disclosure agreement, and the statute of limitations runs out. So now that's why we're finding out about it, however long later. Two, being that Poot was the only one that watched it twice, I do want to hear from him. So, Poot, please enlighten me enlighten us all with what you got out of it.
28 minutes later. So, I mean, here's the thing. To say that anyone is surprised by any of this you should be ashamed of yourself, because we tend to forget and kind of disassociate professional wrestlers from the professional athlete behavior. There is so much that we don't hear about how professional athletes act when they are out and about, whether they're on planes, whether they're at clubs, whether they're out having dinner, whether they're at strip clubs, whether they're doing, on camping trips with the boys, doing whatever. Whenever you're in that kind of position where you have fame, money, wealth, and a company or organization to protect you, you're going to have a lot more freedom and feel like you are the king of the fucking world. When someone names their dick Space Mountain, are you seriously surprised they're a sexual predator and do stuff like this? Really? That to me, it's one of those things that I just sat there. I didn't have any big shocking moments. I didn't have anything. I sat there and I went,
oh no, we lost them.
I'm still here.
Okay, you're good.
Yep, we got you.
You cut there for a second.
Yeah, because our internet is being fucking pissy. Thanks, Atlantic Broadband. You're the worst in the universe. To say that my point with what I was saying is to say that we're surprised by this. I sat there and I went, yep. And the thing is, you look at the people that were on there that were being interviewed. Just incredible, straight shooter. Rob Van Dam, straight shooter. Jim Ross, you can tell he's lamenting what happened. You can tell it. You can tell it's one of those things that, sure, I mean, this statement is not meant to exonerate anyone or excuse any kind of behavior, but it's more the fact that, like, during that time, before social media really was a huge thing, before the internet was as prolific as it was, and I mean, it was around, it was a thing, but like, this was a time when people could get away with murder. I mean, how often do you see middle-aged white women share the thing on Facebook where it says, I'm so glad the cameras weren't available everywhere to see all the dumb shit I did when I was a kid, and it's supposed to be this pithy, funny thing, but really, it's not. Like, I mean, you're more accountable nowadays, more so than anywhere. And plus, with people being willing to open up and talk about these things, and when you have enough common threads of saying, yeah, shit was more crazy than you people imagine, because we all thought of the plane ride from hell as this legendary kind of event of traveling, wrestling, partying that was like, okay, that's the peak. Like, oh, it's all the old guard, old boys being boys and doing stuff like that. And we all kind of talked about it and went, oh, that sounds rough or whatever. But now we're seeing it in the light that it really is. It's people that do not have to have accountability having their ids go, doing things like dropping H-bombs and having guys like Mike Chioda completely just go like, it was a rib. It was what we did. Yeah, drugging each other. That's real fucking hilarious, you sack of garbage. It's just like, this is the kind of stuff, and right now, this kind of behavior, this kind of attitude, these kind of things really, especially now, just more so as I get older and meet people and talk to people and experience things and see how people act, really makes me feel sad and think, there's always been the joke that, what is it from The Office where Dwight says, we need another plague. Well, you know what? We had one. And it put a lot in perspective for a lot of people. But listen, I'm sorry. I'm not done. I didn't talk for 27 minutes.
You're good.
Do you know how hard that is for me? Jesus Christ. It's the thing that first I wasn't surprised. And I wasn't surprised about this. I was just like, finally, this kind of stuff is coming to light. And the problem is with a guy like Ric Flair, goes back to the Dark Knight. You either die the hero or was it you either die the hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And the more and more time that we go along, Ric Flair's legacy is being tainted and destroyed because of his behavior. And the fact that there are still people like Tommy fucking Dreamer, who was one of my favorite ECW alumni. I loved him. I loved Tommy Dreamer. His battle with Raven, the whole thing of how he was always the perpetual baby face that you looked at him and you just wanted to cheer him on. And it was this completely ruined Tommy Dreamer for me, because if you're going to sit there all these years later and you're going to sit there and you're just going to blow it off like this was no big deal, and you're going to say Ric Flair would never force himself on anyone, I'm sorry. When you have people that are corroborating this, when you have a straight shooter like Rob Van Dam, who has he has nothing to lose in telling the truth. Like Tommy Dreamer, I feel like he's one of those people that he wants to constantly remain in good standing with WWE. He wants to constantly remain keeping that bridge unburnt. So he'll say whatever he has to keep some kind of opportunity for a paycheck rolling. Rob Van Dam, he could give a fuck. So I believe Rob Van Dam over him. And to have Tommy Dreamer say, someone's always offended by everything. My haircut is offending someone right now. I'm like, that. Listen,
Yep.
that
fucking comment.
That does not hold water. That's like trying to fill up a sieve. Like, that doesn't work in this situation. That can work other places. That can work with other topics. But when it comes to something like this, accountability and everything. I don't care if it's years later. I don't care if Ric Flair is getting senile. I don't care if he's getting old. He needs to be held accountable for his actions. And the people that are on there that had these things exposed, especially with the whole H-bomb thing, with Dustin Rhodes being an embarrassment and spitting in the back of the thing, with all this kind of stuff, it needs to come out, and they even at minimum need to feel some kind of public shame. I understand that might be unpopular to a lot of people, but my God, it really just made me go like, yep, all the old stories are true. And I'm so happy that the current generation of wrestlers, whether it's in WWE, whether it's in New Japan, whether it's in AEW, wherever, yeah, you're going to have some bad seeds. You're going to have people who do bad things. But for the most part, it seems like these people want to live, cleaner lives. They want to be athletes. They want to have fun. They want to just do the best they can and make the best life that they can. And they don't really care about H-bombing each other or being big party animals. It really makes me feel good that there is a delineation. And I think it was JR said it when he said, the younger guys look and go, I don't want to be that.
Yep.
Yeah. Rob Van Dam even referenced they say never meet your heroes. And, Rob Van Dam referenced that in regards to Ric Flair, because he said no one wants to see their hero, twirling their dick around in front of everybody. And you know what? Let's talk for a second about how big of a piece of shit Tommy Dreamer is.
Oh, yeah.
Especially, I'm glad that Poot brought it up, because it bears talking about. Tommy Dreamer compared him at 50 years old having two ponytails as being on the same grounds of offensiveness as pinning somebody in a small room with your dick out, trying to convince them to touch it.
No,
so
we need to start.
That's what Tommy Dreamer's comparing there.
We need to start and keep on calling it a sexual predator, because, and we're going to talk about Ric Flair more, but I think that this is 100% a result of him being a sexual predator.
Yeah. I want to say this. As we're sitting here, condemning the actions of the past and praying that, people are smart enough not to fucking follow in these footsteps. I'm not. This is not me sticking up for anybody. This is me saying we're not sitting here being the social justice keyboard warriors of the wrestling podcasting. Like, nobody's fucking perfect. Okay, let me tell you a little something from my own personal accounts. Okay, now this is nothing like a plane ride from hell, but I will say that being in the military, I was in the barracks with a bunch of other guys that I didn't drink at the barracks. I never got drunk at the barracks because I knew better. There's a saying in the Marine Corps: there's one thief in the Marine Corps, everybody else is just trying to get their shit back. It's a very, very odd feeling knowing that you can trust somebody with your life, but I won't trust them with the contents of my wall locker. You better believe my shit was locked up, and I was fucking had my wits about me anytime I was at the barracks and people were drinking, because I knew people are fucking stupid. And I don't know these people well enough outside of the professional setting that is my occupation as a Marine Corps infantryman. I don't know them well enough to trust them with my personal stuff. I trust them to do their job professionally and to have my ass, cover me if I need them to. But I don't trust them as far as I can throw them. If that makes sense.
Crazy cognitive dissonance.
It really is. It really, really is. And and here's the thing: there is a line that you don't cross. Okay, it's one thing if your buddy passes out and you draw on them with magic marker and say, "Oh, I pissed my pants" or whatever, and you fucking doodle on them and shit like that. It's another when you fucking literally drug people on purpose just for a fucking laugh. Okay.
Yeah, and call it a rib.
And now, everybody has their own senses of humor, and some people nowadays will argue that, people have gone too soft. And in some cases, I'll agree. Some people need to have a stick up their ass. We need to understand that there is a line. There's a certain line you don't cross. This is way beyond that fucking line. But the thing of it is now, and I want to. This is something that Poot mentioned, and I will say, one way or another, somebody is paying for this, because while Ric Flair may not have been legally persecuted for his actions back in the day, you said it best. His legacy now is being completely tarnished. His merchandise got pulled from WWE. I bet you we don't see him on those Car Shield commercials very soon. I guarantee you AEW is not going to go try to acquire Ric Flair now.
Tony Khan will stay the hell away from him.
Oh yeah. Well, it's the thing. It's the thing of it's the thing of nowadays, and this is not to excuse it. This is just an observation of society through the looking glass here. Back in that time, you didn't have social media and everything like that, like Poot mentioned. You didn't have this accountability to where now the information is available to you at the snap of your fingers, in the palm of your hand. You literally have a working computer in your fucking pocket at almost all times. You didn't have this back in the day. So a lot of stuff was all still going on. We just didn't know how bad it was because we didn't have that information available to us. It's like nowadays we see like, oh, there's so many more sexual predators and everything like that. There was still probably the same amount of people back then. We just didn't fucking know about it. And I will say that this generation that we have, like I would say from our generation and younger, our generation is probably one of the first ones that are really having to deal with a lot of the fallout of having social media. It's one thing if you say and make an insensitive tweet when you're 15, 16, something like that. You're young, you're dumb. People do mature over time, hopefully. I know I have. I'm pretty sure the other three bozos here have as well.
Yep.
For the most part, allegedly.
Hell, yeah.
But words are one thing, actions are another. That's when you get into something. If you say something fucked up or racially insensitive or whatever, you make a stupid tweet or something, when you're young, that's one thing you can. I don't feel like you have to be crucified for that now, 20 years later. But if you're somebody that's a sexual predator or sexually assaulted somebody when you're 16, that's a fucking problem. That's a big fucking difference, a big delineage there. Regardless if it was 20, 30, 40 years ago,
yep.
You need to be held as accountable as humanly possible. Now, with Ric Flair's case, he wasn't legally held accountable then.
Yep.
But he's getting his fucking comeuppance now. Karma has a way of fucking catching up with you.
And we need to be very specific on this. He was never indicted.
Yep.
Lots of accusations, but he has never been convicted of anything. So while we are giving our opinions very vehemently and very strongly, we can accuse till we're blue in the face, at the end of the day, nothing has happened with him. Same as McMahon and the Snuka case and everything else. Like, we can sit here and, talk till we're blue in the face, but at the end of the day, legally, and we're talking heads on a podcast, so of course we're going to, jump, to react very quickly. But here's the thing with Ric Flair, and this is where I'm at currently, and I have been for a while. People revere him. People have always said he's Ric Flair. Did he have some of the best in ring work in the 80s? Yeah. Is he a great promo hand? Of course. But at the end of the day, none of that should justify any of this. And this, I think, Dark Side of the Ring is the tip of the iceberg. Don't be surprised if we get 50 to 60 more women coming out against Ric Flair, because you don't just flip this switch once. Right. You don't just go too far one night when you've had, a little bit too much alcohol. No. This is learned behavior. And this is something that again, all of his legendary, his Conkers, Space Mountain, that whole fucking thing. All of that needs to be called into question now as to how much of it was people lining up and how much of it was Ric Flair forcing people to line up.
And the kind of problem even further is that, you know, a lot of people are able to separate the art from the artist. It's possible. I have done it in the past.
Right.
You know, I mean, a lot of people, and you talk to a lot of people, and it's one that I'm on the fence about, especially watching some of the documentaries, but like Michael Jackson is one of them. Can you separate the art from the artist? More recently, with John Schaefer of Iced Earth and his involvement, whatever your position, I'm not bashing anything here. I'm just making a statement again of separating the art from the artist. John Schaefer from Iced Earth and his involvement with the insurrection. Can you separate the art from the artist? You know, like it goes back to a lot of things. Same thing with what's the one metal band where the singer was caught hiring a hitman to kill his wife.
I didn't even hear about that.
Oh yeah, it's oh god.
Give me the song name. I might know.
No, it's I can't remember. The thing that I can remember is the guitarist Nick Hypa of I can't remember the name of the band. He played in a band called Wage War. But again, a lot of people, whenever that singer, after he served his time and came back into the fold and they reformed the band, there was a lot of people that were like, hell yeah, we're finally getting this band back. But then there was a huge pushback of people being like, no, just like, you know, but that's my point, is that it's like, at what point is it not okay to separate the art from the artist anymore? And I think Ric Flair is really pushing that line hard.
Oh, and it's like we've said before, in wrestling, some of the best work that you get, some of the best character work you get, is when you take your own personality and turn it up to 20. In this case of Ric Flair, they've even said before, you know, with the Four Horsemen, like, yeah, that was, you know, their characters they did, but they were living that lifestyle. They were riding in limousines. They were wearing Rolexes. They were fucking balling back in that time for what balling was back then. So you can't tell me that there was a clear delineation. The line was definitely, most certainly blurred, in my opinion.
So I don't see a blurred line here. Like, to me, it's cut and dry. Like, I think the dude's a monster. I think that all of the boys enabling him have made him the size of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. This is, like, the same way that I felt about the fucking, like, Paterno-Sandusky thing that happened way back when. Like, the minute that I found out about it, nope. I don't care who you fucking root for. I don't care how big your allegiances lie. Whenever there's a program like that where there is like a system of like delivering people to people like this, like, you know, that's a fucking monster. And I fear, you know, and again, I'm not trying to slander him at all. I just fear that this has been happening for a long time with Slick Rick.
Yep.
That, again, I'm not trying to exonerate him, but, like, the boys saying, it's just Rick. Like, how many more fucking problems did that create?
Yeah. Complete sidebar, just because now I was curious, Poot. Your guy that you mentioned, Nick Hypa,
yeah.
He was with As I Lay Dying.
As I Lay Dying, that's it.
Yes.
Because I know after that I know
that was gonna. Yeah, I know that was gonna bother you.
Yeah, they formed Wage War. Was their band Woven War? That's it, Woven War. But yeah, As I Lay Dying, and man, I loved As I Lay Dying. But when I heard about that, I was like, well, done with them.
And as Ransom mentioned, you know, Flair's not the only one that came off looking like a real dirtbag. Tommy Dreamer, 100%. And not just because of the, you know, people are going to be offended by my hair. Like, no, he basically said, it's Rick. You know, what are you going to do? It's Ric Flair. Well, you're going to fucking stand up and say, dude, quit being a fucking predator. Sit down and pass the fuck out.
Yeah, that's the thing that I think sticks in my craw the most is with everything that was going on this plane, I can't imagine that when Flair was in full-blown sexual predator mode on this flight attendant, I have a hard time imagining that, A, only Goldust and Rob Van Dam were the only two on that plane that were still awake. Now, I get it. There were some people that were passed out, I'm sure. There were some people that were probably trying to sleep, I'm sure. But at the same token, with all of the shit going on, with all of the roughhousing and the drinking and all that nonsense, how are those the only two that were awake? Again, it's speculation, but I have a problem. I have a problem there. And B, this circles back to the top. Yep. With all of the stuff going on this plane, not just Flair doing his thing, but people on the mic screaming about how we're all going to die. With the fact that, okay, so they made a mess with food and drink containers. Fine, that's a mess. But with blood on the plane, vomit on the plane, and needles, that's not, oh, I have an ouchie back and I'm going to take a pain pill, or, oh, I need something to help me sleep because I have an ouchie back, so I'm going to take a sleepy pain pill.
To be fair, at that time, it could be roids.
Yeah.
This doesn't matter. Needles were found on this fucking plane. And you have Vince McMahon telling JR, go handle it.
Yeah.
There's a problem here with that.
Here's the other question. Where were the locker room leaders? Do you know what the main event of Insurrection was? Triple H versus The Undertaker. Stone Cold also wrestled The Big Show. Those four guys, in my mind, had the size and the clout.
Were they on the plane?
I
Yes.
mean, where else would they be? If WWE, if
Vince was on that plane,
yeah.
Taker, Stone Cold, and Triple H were on that
right.
plane.
Yeah,
They probably ignored it.
I was gonna say, you know what? They may no, they weren't up in first class with Vince because he was the only one up there. But
even if they were, Terry was up there, Paul Heyman was up there, JR was up there. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they were up there or not.
Yeah,
if these are your locker room leaders, there's no way to ignore that this shit is going on this plane. If pilots are coming out of the cockpit to try to calm people down, fucking everybody in first class had to have known there is a problem when a pilot comes out of the cockpit to try to calm down someone that's out of control on a plane. Everyone on the plane knows what the fuck is going on.
Yep.
So for all of those people, and you know what? Again, sorry, but not sorry. When you have these high-profile guys that are supposed to be the leaders of your company, not only the fact that the head honcho was there and his wife, Vince McMahon's wife, is on a plane where where Ric Flair is trying to get a flight attendant to touch his dick. So you have all these people, and no one other than JR is going to the back to try to call. It's clear that whatever JR did wasn't working, or Vince McMahon sent JR out there way too late after all the shit had gone down. But regardless, the fact that Austin, Triple H, Undertaker, Vince, or Linda didn't handle their shit, didn't handle the shit that was going on their plane. Their company chartered this plane. Is that not a massive red flag? Like, when all this is going on, I hear the alarm that goes off in video games when a nuke is about to hit. Yeah. That whistle, how do you not have that screaming in your ear? Oh shit, something's going down on this plane. These are my employees. These are the people that we're leading.
Fun fact, that's called a klaxon.
Okay, so the klaxon is going off. And nothing, what? You're sending JR back there? Nothing against JR, but the dude didn't get the job done. It's clear that the dude didn't get the job done. And when you have people in your company, yes, when you have people in your company drugging their coworkers for fun, that's something they did for fun. They're openly admitting they did that for fun. you have Ric Flair swinging his Johnson around, which, again, they're all openly admitting Ric Flair did that for fun. He did that to make the boys laugh. And you're not controlling this shit. You're not in a locker room with just the boys. You're on a plane, A, over the Atlantic, and B, you have people that are not your employees that you're doing this in front of, that you're allowing the employees of your company to do in front of these people. Where is any of the accountability?
Right.
Well,
this is a big problem.
And let's not forget, like, I'm sure, because, unfortunately, the boys will be boys mentality is something that will pervade, I'm sure, for another fucking millennia. But, this is a company, this charter company, did things with other team sports, basketball teams, football teams, hockey. They were used to, like, boys being boys, as it were. This was and this is 100% in a microcosm the problem with how wrestlers were back in the day, and I'm sure that some of them still are, with, like, the crazy fucking party life that they live. And I love and I hate that the Mike Chioda comment where he's like, oh, well, if they would have cut us off and if they wouldn't have brought the drink cart back, I guarantee if Flair would have taken, like 10 grand and been like, hey, go get me some booze. He's probably not wrong. As fucking sad as that is, even if Vince and Linda put the kibosh and said, hey, you guys, we've done one cart, we're good, which they didn't. They should have, but they didn't. Even if they did, these assholes probably would have found a way to make it work.
On top of that, let me just interject and say that that the flight attendant that got interviewed, she said normally on a normal flight, she would not go through an entire liquor cart. They went through three full liquor carts.
Yep.
Let that sink
absolutely.
in.
Absolutely.
Let that sink in.
The thing that doesn't really, if I'm going to be completely honest, and this is my own opinion, the only person that came off in any of this that really didn't seem to have any sort of rust on him was Rob Van Dam. JR, in my opinion, didn't come off in a great light in this either, because I think he said at one point, well, the boys this was their only chance, between all the shows that they did over in Europe and then getting back home and having to go to a Monday Night Raw. This was their chance to let their hair down and to let loose and blah blah blah. It really almost sounded like JR was trying his hardest to excuse some of this behavior without coming out and excusing some of this behavior. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't understand. Like, there's a difference between letting your hair down and going through 3 liquor carts,
right,
and trashing a plane with blood, vomit, and needles. That's not boys being boys. That's, you have a severe disciplinary problem in your company, and you're not doing anything about it.
Now, I'm gonna be in the opinion not to dissent against what you're saying, but I will say this: I don't necessarily think that JR, looking back on it, I don't think he's trying to excuse them. I think sometimes, and this is probably a lot of the problem where we have in these situations, in any situation, is when people don't know how to articulate their point very well. I understand that they are under a lot of duress or whatever, both physically, mentally, whatever, and this is, them doing this. It's not excusing them, saying it's okay for them to blow off the steam this way, but this was the way that they did it, for better or for worse. Obviously, we are all in the opinion of it being for the worse. So I think maybe that's what JR was trying to articulate. And maybe he just didn't get that point out that well. Some may argue, and I'm not going to argue for the side of Tommy Dreamer, but I'm going to play devil's advocate. I'm going to try to say that maybe Tommy Dreamer wasn't trying to excuse certain people's actions, but just saying that's what it was back in the day. But again, if you're going to state and say, hey, this is what happened, But you have to say, this is what happened, even though as fucked up as it was, I don't condone this. Like, you have to make that clear delineation, because we are in an age of accountability where if you don't fucking cover your ass, right, wrong, or indifferent, you will get crucified, right, wrong, or indifferent. And that we're seeing that now also with Tommy Dreamer. He's suspended currently from Impact. I don't know what the status is of his working with the Busted Open podcast.
He's gone.
He's gone.
Yep,
Okay.
Yep. Look,
So there you go.
said they're not going to tolerate it. And he's gone.
Nope.
Yeah, so there you go. So I mean, and not to fucking boo-hoo, but look, again, look at the karmic justice that's happening there. Like, you have, Tommy Dreamer, who, like Poot, I was a big fan of in his ECW days and everything like that. He's, he had a great mind for the business and everything like that. He's, been doing work with Impact and everything like that. He brought up a lot of, he had a lot of great salient points on Busted Open with Bully Ray and Dave LaGreca and everything like that. But you have to be very, very careful about what you say and how you say it. And you need to make sure that you differentiate in your words of whether you come off as condoning somebody's actions or condemning them. If he would have come off and condemned it and said, listen, this was what he did and it's fucked up. And looking back on it, man, I really wish I could go back and change it, but I can't, unfortunately, and that's the way it was. That would have been one thing, but the way he came off as a total dirtbag. JR, on the other hand, I will say, I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think JR came off with as much egg on his face, because one of the first things that he said about it when they did the opening, he said, the plane ride from hell. He's like, if I never have to talk about that damn day again, I'd be happy with that. I'm sure he regrets a lot of shit that went down. And, like you said, he's lamenting because, unfortunately, he was the one that had to do the dirty work. He said, he's like, hey, the boss writes the checks and I got to do what he tells me. So if he says, go fire this person, that was my job to fire them or find them or whatever. In the case of Goldust, Dustin Rhodes, JR had that discretion. Okay, I can either fire him or I can fine him. I knew that I already had to fire these people, this person, and this person. I had to exercise a little discretion and chalked it up to him being immature. And, now look at the, the career and everything that has happened for Dustin. He's had a very long, I'd say, pretty successful career. He doesn't come off as a total dickbag. We're not sitting here canceling Dustin Rhodes because he spittooned in the back of a seat on a fucking private plane. As fucked up as it is, as disgusting as that is, I fucking hated anybody. I hated people that would leave fucking spitter bottles and shit like that around. It's fucking disgusting. Whatever. But my point being is, be very careful of how you present yourself. Regardless of what your opinion is, cover your ass, because very easily fucking karma comes back around and bites you in the ass. It did it to Tommy Dreamer. Now, with all the shit coming out about Flair, he's getting his karmic justice right now.
Hopefully he does.
He is.
There's no big enough justice. I know. Dude,
I know.
And again,
it's a Band-Aid on an axe wound. I know.
This is me being knee-jerk beefy, but I don't feel like anything is at this point. He's lived a long, full, luxurious life that probably included more incidents like this than we want to imagine.
Yeah.
And there's nothing at this point. That's just like when again, I'm gonna reference the PSU scandal because that's the only thing that even comes to mind, like how deep this rabbit hole could go. When Paterno got fired and he died 2 months later, whatever, I don't feel like that was justice enough.
For the lives that he essentially helped destroy.
Yeah, exactly. That he was a complicitory part of it.
Yeah.
I feel like JR was very measured, because I think that unlike most people in the business, I feel like JR has a good relationship with Vince McMahon. Despite Vince McMahon constantly making him eat shit sandwiches, and I mean constantly, I feel like he's got a good relationship with Vince. So I think he was very measured that he didn't want to, implicate too much. But at the end of the day, and Ransom has said it a couple times, the owner of the company and the CEO of the company were sitting no more than 50 feet from all of this.
Yep.
There is no reason. There's no way they didn't hear the fucking commotion.
No.
There's no way they didn't see the 3 carts of booze come and go.
Right.
There's no way they didn't see the captain go back. There's no chance in hell not to put a pun on it. But
They would have heard everything that happened on the PA system, too, because
100%.
Terry was sitting up in first class with them, and she heard on the PA Dustin singing that song, and that's when freaking Paul Heyman said to her, again, twice in one episode, someone said to her, don't sell it. Just don't sell it. So if they heard that up in first class, they were up there with Vince. So Vince heard everything that happened on that PA system. Not only Goldust singing, but whoever that wrestler was that got on the PA system during the Lesnar Hennig fight, screaming about how we're all gonna die, blah blah blah.
I feel like that might have been X-Pac.
They didn't say on the show.
Yeah, they did.
Okay.
They didn't say, but yeah.
But they heard everything.
Agree.
And again, I hate to piss in JR's Wheaties, but you know what? I feel like he needs to be. And I don't know. Like I'm a little torn, but I feel like, you know what? You're fucking Jim Ross.
Yeah.
So he's at this juncture, he's not a new boy in this game.
No,
Right.
He's been around a long ass time. And even if Vince McMahon didn't say to him, these guys are gonna have to get on the plane. This guy's gonna get fired. This guy's gonna get fined. Blah blah blah. JR has enough stroke, and he has enough knowledge of the wrestling business to be able to go into the back of that plane and be like, hey guys, I don't know what's going to wind up happening when this flight lands, but I can tell you this, heads are going to fucking roll. People are going to get fined. People are going to get fired. You need to knock this shit off and knock it off now. There's no reason on God's green earth that JR didn't have the stroke to go into that cabin and say to them, knock it off now, because we're going to start firing people. Whether or not he wound up delivering on that when the plane landed or not, he had the stroke to make that threat.
Right.
So,
you know what? Heads are going to roll. Sit your ass down. Act like a fucking professional, because that's what we are, and stop this shit.
let me compare this to a situation that you and I had, Ransom. And this is like apples and fucking atom bombs, okay? But remember the game of Clarion when we went to Lockhaven and we were just the most unruly people in the world. Yep. And Larry Wells tried, and he got the drum majors to try, and he ended up just walking away and smoking because it was mob mentality at that point. That's the only thing I'll say. I'm pretty sure, honestly, with the amount of booze that they consumed, with the mob mentality, I'm pretty sure that Vincent Kennedy McMahon could have walked through that curtain and been like, if you don't knock it off, you're all fired. Every last fucking one of you. And nothing would have changed.
At
that point, I think damage was done. I think they were drunk. I think that they were, a drunk mob at that point.
Yep.
And honestly, Vince probably knew, if I go back there, it's not going to make any difference. I'll make JR the fall guy and make it seem like it's all fucking JR's fault.
Now, I can see your point, and I understand the reference that you're giving here with Larry Wells. But at the same time, I have to put into perspective, your reference is a band director of a college marching band who is unruly in the sense that we were making fun of another football team and another school's marching band.
Right.
We were unruly in that sense.
Like I said, apples and atom bombs. I
agree. But I hear what you're saying, and I agree. Yes. So Larry Wells probably walking away, he probably knew, all right, nothing's going to get done here. The punishments are going to come afterwards. But we were a college marching band. This is a multi-million-dollar, if not billion-dollar company, where these people are being paid. These people are supposed to be professional athletes. We were a bunch of dummy college kids.
It's true.
And I supremely doubt that if Vince would have gone back there and yelled in his Vince McMahon voice, that people would have just ignored him. Like, maybe they would ignore JR. Maybe they would ignore Michael Hayes or Paul Heyman. Maybe they would even ignore, let's say, Triple H. Or if The Undertaker would have went back, they probably would have settled down a bit, but it might have picked back up again.
Well,
but when you have Vince McMahon, the be-all, end-all, he's the god of what you do for a living at this juncture. Like, this is his universe. This is a guy who has referenced this company being his universe. You're telling me that the ruler of this universe can't control a plane full of wrestlers? I really don't think that that's the case. If Vince would have went back there and gone, pointed people right out. You don't sit your ass down, I'm going to fire you. You don't sit your ass down, you're suspended. When we hit the fucking tarmac, I'm writing it up. You're fired, you're suspended, you're fined. This is your last warning. I shudder to think that they would have ignored the supreme ruler of the WWE universe.
I don't think they would, and we are for our new format getting a little long in the tooth. But
I do have one. Sorry, I do have one thing to add once you're done.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think they would have. I think there are some people that would have kind of quote unquote metaphorically spat in Vince McMahon's face, because he's like, "What are you gonna do? I make you so much money. What are you gonna do? Fire me?"
Some people may have, but other people probably would have.
Yeah,
fucking straightened up.
I know some people would have. I think one of them that wouldn't have, that would have been more of a problem, was Brock Lesnar. I don't think Ric Flair would have, not even a bit. Like, that's the thing, is the ones that were causing. Well, to be fair, Brock really wasn't. I mean, he was a huge part of the problem. Possibly,
he was retaliatory.
He was retaliatory, and that's just as culpable for the situation. But
keep in mind the era, though. This isn't an era where they're like, "Well, what are you going to do? Fire me? I'll go somewhere else." Vince had just bought ECW and WCW. The other promotions might still have been around. Like, I don't know, where the Ring of Honor and AAA and all that, New Japan. I don't know where they fell at that juncture. But as far as making a decent living and being seen by a lot of people,
WWE
this was an era where there was one company to be in. And I think Tommy Dreamer even said it, if you wanted to make a living in the wrestling business at this point, you had WWE, because they had bought the only two other big promotions that were really out there.
Yep.
So I think Vince could have made that threat. Like, I'll fucking fire you. What are you going to do? Go work on the indies? Good luck. You're going to come back and knock on our door in a couple months when you see your fucking paychecks dry up.
Since you just mentioned his name, this is the last thing I want to talk about with Tommy Dreamer. The one thing that he said to me that is a problem in a lot of I'm going to say it, rape and sexual assault, sexual predator cases and stuff like that. Tommy Dreamer said, if it bothered her that bad enough, then why didn't she speak up and say something then?
Now, I'm going to say this.
Yeah, he said, why did she take the payoff?
Why did Tommy Dreamer drink a big glass of dumb fuck juice before he gave this interview? I don't understand.
And I think if of all the shit that he said, that was probably the most damning and probably the shit that got him suspended and fired from Busted Open. I'm going to say this. To anybody else that has that mentality, number one, go fuck yourself. Come at me, fucking find me, go fuck yourself. Number two, you don't know until you've been in that situation or any other situation for that matter, when you are the victim of a rape, of a sexual assault, or if you're in any situation at all, you can be like a deer in headlights. You don't know how you're going to react in a situation until you face that situation. The only time that you can remotely control stuff is when you train for situations and you go through scenarios repeatedly to condition yourself to expect things to be second nature. That is the only time that you are going to have a modicum of self-awareness of how you may perceivably act in a given situation. So to tell somebody, well, you should have spoke up then, you should have done this, you should have done that, go to hell, because you shouldn't be victim blaming or victim shaming anybody that has been through that, especially somebody who's been through the horrors of a sexual assault or worse, full-on rape. I shudder to think how anybody can see that being an excusable reaction and response to somebody who's been living with this. The flight attendant said it herself. Half these guys might forget about, fucking Ric Flair might have been so drunk out of his mind that he forgot about what happened, but she has to live with that memory. That could have been something that gave her PTSD for fucking years to come. It could have affected her relationship, with her husband. It could have affected any other relationships going forward. You have no idea the amount of shit you deal with when you go through something like that and how it affects you on a day-to-day basis. Full disclosure, I know somebody very close to me that was that is a female that was mugged on the South Side here in Pittsburgh, and because of the attackers who did this to her, unfortunately has a little bit of a predisposition to be a little more wary about people around of certain races because of this situation. This person is not a racist by any means. I know them very well. They are not, they are not an unkind person by any means, but they have that PTSD of having to deal with that situation, going through that experience. So for Tommy Dreamer to sit there and say, well, if it bothered her that much, why did she take the payoff? Go fuck yourself, dude. Seriously. Go fuck yourself. And anybody else that has that mentality, let you be the fucking victim of something like that and see what you do. Go fuck yourself. I'm done ranting there.
Well, guys, I hate to put a cap on this because we could keep going, but to reiterate what Beef said earlier in the episode, if you have not watched any of Dark Side of the Ring, first of all, you're doing yourself a disservice because you learn a lot about wrestling history. You get to see a different perspective from legendary wrestling events, personalities, incidences, and maybe we'll give you a new light on things. Go check it out. The documentary up until, aside from the most recent episode, is available on Hulu. And also, you could check out the Plane Ride from Hell episode, the one that we have gone on about in this episode, on YouTube. And I feel like this is, might be perceived by some people as a cheesy thing, but if you are the victim of sexual harassment, and if you are the victim of someone attempting to make you do things that you don't want to do and didn't take no as a no, contact someone. And make sure to reach out. Don't wait. And I know it can be embarrassing. It can feel awful, but contact the authorities. There's there's plenty of people. Reach out to family members. Reach out to, even pastors, priests, whoever. Reach out to them. Talk to them, and don't be quiet, because if you're quiet about these things, then things will not change, and people will not, will not get the justice served on them that is deserved. So, and again, this is, trying to be as sensitive as possible. And I know I've never been in that situation, and I don't think the other fellows on the podcast have, and we can't even imagine the pain that anyone is going through. But if you can, realize that there are people out there that want to help you and are there for you and will help you move forward and get the justice you deserve. On that note, with the way that the episode has been, we should just kind of leave it at that. And again, do yourself a favor and go watch this episode. really put a lot in perspective for you. Thank you for listening to the P3 podcast, and have a good evening.